Good evening, and welcome to this Candidates Forum presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland Heights Chapter, the Heights Libraries and Future Heights. We're pleased you could all join us tonight. My name is Blanche Valancy, and I'm coordinator, along with Betsy Tracy, of these forums. I'm looking out at the space where 100 or more of you would be sitting at an ordinary forum. But we are not living in ordinary times. So I must be content to imagine that many or more citizens watching on the internet and many more who will access this recording in the days ahead, leading up to the September 14th primary election for the first ever directly elected mayor of Cleveland Heights, Ohio. The current public health situation necessitated a rapid pivot from the in-person forum you have all come to expect over the years. This could never have happened without the hard work of the Heights Chapter leadership team, and most especially of Betsy Tracy, Michael Barron, and Peter Graves of the League and our video partner, and of Cheryl Banks, Communications Director, and Matt Hoffman, IT Manager of the Heights Libraries. I was out of state and missed it, and I am in awe of their quick action and detailed planning. Without their efforts, we would not be coming to you in this virtual format. We will take just a few minutes to introduce the three sponsoring organizations. Since 1920, the League of Women Voters has been a leader, empowering voters, defending democracy. The League does not endorse candidates or support political parties, although it does take positions on issues. The League encourages informed and active participation in government and works to influence public policy through study, education, and advocacy. During the election season, the League provides nonpartisan candidate information through voters' guides and candidate forums like this one. You can learn about our activities on our website, lwvgreatercleveland.org, and access voter information from vote411.org, a National League website with information on voting and candidates. The League has organizations at the national, state, and local levels to serve voters at all three levels. The Cleveland Heights University Heights Chapter is part of the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland and serves Cleveland Heights and University Heights. Individuals can join the League at the local level. Interested? Go to lwvgreatercleveland.org and hit the Join button. Regular individual dues are $60 per year, but we realize that this can be steep for some, so we welcome all who can join with whatever they can afford. Choose the alternate amount on the membership form. When you join LWVGC, you can choose to affiliate with a chapter, such as the Heights Chapter. This membership automatically makes you a member of the Ohio and U.S. Leagues. If you appreciate the services the League provides to voters during the election season, you can make a tax-deductible donation to the League of Women Voters Education Fund. Go to the website, hit the Donate button. Your donation can be earmarked for the Heights Chapter, which we would really greatly appreciate. Those funds would support the voter guides and forums organized by this chapter and will make it possible for us to continue to stream and record them for home viewing. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Cheryl Banks, Communications Director for the Heights Libraries. Cheryl?
Got a little musical introduction here.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Cheryl Banks. I'm the Communications Manager of the Cleveland Heights University Heights Public Library System, and welcome to our Mayoral Candidates Forum tonight. Welcome, candidates. We are so proud to be partnering with the Greater Cleveland League of Women Voters and with Future Heights to bring you this live stream, this recording of the Cleveland Heights Mayoral Primary Candidates Forum. An important part of our mission as a public library is to support the democratic process in a variety of ways. Two of our branches, this branch here, Lee Road, and the University Heights branch in the city of University Heights, are polling places. We also provide citizens with voter registration forms and with absentee ballot forms and mail-in ballot forms. And most importantly, we provide access to information, whether it be by phone, in person, or online. And that access comes with no regard to a person's race, gender, nationality, age, sexual orientation, citizenship status, or income. We're here for every citizen, regardless. This is crucial because the success of our democracy depends on a well-educated and well-informed public. So welcome, candidates, and we're looking forward to hearing about your vision for Cleveland Heights.
Thank you, Cheryl. We also want to acknowledge the invaluable help of Future Heights, who have partnered with us for many years. They are part of getting the voter's guide out in both electronic and printed form. And we welcome all three candidates. Our moderator for this evening is Wendy During, and she will explain the format and introduce the candidates. Thank you very much.
Take it. Hello, everybody. I'm Wendy During, a member of the League of Women Voters and moderator for this evening. I would like to thank all of you for making a concerted effort to become fully informed voters for this local election, since local government has a major and direct impact on our daily lives. As Blanche mentioned, you can find a copy of the voter's guide, which is inside the August issue of Heights Observer. So be sure you find your copy. There are 5 questions that are already included in the voter's guide, which we will not be asking tonight. Those 5 questions, which you will find in the voter's guide, which is also available on the website for Future Heights, futureheights.org. You can find the voter's guide there as well. In the voter's guide, you will find not only the bios of the candidates, but also their answers to these 5 questions. What do you consider to be an effective working relationship between the elected mayor and members of city council? What opportunities do you see for regional collaboration between Cleveland Heights and other local governments to provide services or facilities? What, if any, specific actions would you recommend the city take to reverse the decline of its aging housing? What is your vision for the redevelopment of Severn Center? And what city actions would be necessary to facilitate that vision? And finally, what role should environmental considerations play in the city's policies and actions? Again, because these questions have already been asked and answered in the voter's guide, we will not be asking them here this evening, in case you sent one in and you're not getting it answered. This is a forum to hear from the 3 candidates who are seeking election to the newly created position of elected mayor of the city of Cleveland Heights. The 4th candidate, Josephine Moore, has decided to suspend her campaign. The elected mayor will serve as the chief executive of the city, overseeing all departments and divisions of city government. The mayor will also serve as the director of public safety. It is a 4-year term, which pays $115,000 per year. This is a nonpartisan primary, and the top 2 candidates in the primary will then face off in the main election on November 3rd. Before we begin tonight's forum, we have a few rules. Each candidate will have 5 minutes for an opening statement and 5 minutes for a closing statement after a question and answer period. Time limits will be enforced. Only written questions will be accepted. If you would like to submit a question still for the candidates during this forum, please send it via email to heights@lwvgreatercleveland, all one word, lwvgreatercleveland.org. The email box is being monitored this evening. League screeners will review the submitted questions. This is not to block opinions or to skew information, but in order to avoid duplication, provide a diversity of questions, and to ensure readability and appropriateness. To quote Thomas Jefferson, as always, information is the currency of democracy. May you be made wealthy by your participation this evening. The order of speaking has been determined by drawing lots, and it will be reversed for the closing statements. Our first opening statement will come from Kahlil Seren. Go ahead.
My name is Kahlil Seren, Council Vice President for the City of Cleveland Heights. For those of you that don't know me yet, thank you for taking this time to allow me to introduce myself. I've served the City of Cleveland Heights as a council member since 2015. Before that, I advised City Council on the use of community development dollars as a member of our Citizens Advisory Committee. Professionally, I've spent the last decade working as a policy advisor for Cuyahoga County Council as the primary advisor on issues of economic, workforce, and community development. Before my time in county government, I worked as a communications coordinator for a state policy research institute called Policy Matters Ohio. I studied law and public policy at Levin College, the #2 urban policy school in the nation. In addition to my Master's of Urban Studies, I earned a graduate certificate in urban economic development. The quality of my education means that I was ready to help guide the county's transition from a board of commissioners to an executive council form of government. I was one of 4 people hired in council staff for the task. I'm the only candidate in this race with experience building a 21st century government from the ground up. I have the municipal government experience, connections, and skills to accomplish basic municipal functions and go further. I've already successfully tackled the type of organizational change facing Cleveland Heights, but perhaps even more importantly, I've been on the ground serving Cleveland Heights. A government transition like the one we're facing will take a series of charter amendments and code changes to get right. A leader with policy and legislative background, like mine, will be key. I've proven my dedication to Cleveland Heights through years of active service. My record on council is front and center. I've pushed the administration and my colleagues to shift from a caretaking mode of being to leading. I promote discussion and buy-in. I hold committee meetings to educate my colleagues, the administration, and the public. I didn't join council to read from a script prepared for me by staff who don't represent the people in a democracy. I'm a bold, forward-thinking, progressive leader. I know that in order to live up to the legacy of Cleveland Heights, we need to lead our neighboring cities, not follow them. I believe that weaving environment into everything we do is good business. We have to start the conversation there, and we have to demand it. We can either be ahead of the curve or fall behind. I pride myself on possessing a combination of know-how and values. I have vetted dozens of economic development deals that have created hundreds of jobs. I've created and helped staff entire government departments that are dedicated to values like environmental sustainability and protecting consumer rights. I'm trusted with analyzing and amending what is currently a $1.75 billion budget. I've led process efficiency projects and to reduce waste. I've designed a $50 million and $30 million demolition and housing program that benefit entire communities by reducing blight, increasing safety, and strengthening our housing markets. All of the programs that I help create are successful because I use my professional knowledge and experience to build into existing structures or to create new structures when necessary, all with the goal of enhancing services to people. I personally administer programs as well. At my direction, the County Scholarship Program has provided over $3 million in scholarships to children across the county. I have a combined 18 years of government experience. I've been administrator and elected. I've earned the trust of other elected officials, and I know Cleveland Heights. My values are in line with our community values. My Heights Hopes plan promotes a healthy, open, prosperous, equitable, and safe Cleveland Heights. I'm running because Cleveland Heights is in danger of squandering this chance to make real progress. I urge everyone who voted on Issue 26, whether you were a yes vote or a no vote, to ask us tough questions tonight and in the future about how we plan to run this government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seren. Our next candidate to speak is Melody Joy Hart.
Good evening. I'm Melody Joy Hart, and I'm running for mayor. I learned about the skills a mayor needs by talking with other mayors, including the mayor of East Providence, who went through the transition just like the one we're facing now. And their advice led me to believe I check all the boxes. I'm the only candidate that meets all their qualifications for mayor. A mayor, they said, needs to have a history of civic engagement, a knowledge of the city, executive management skills, financial acumen, and an ability to be collaborative. I've been deeply involved in the community in many ways. With Greater Cleveland congregations, I have walked the streets of Noble to identify bad houses that are investor-owned and raise those to the city. I attended council meetings for over 4 years before I actually ran for council. I've spent over 30 years in finance, much of it at an executive level. I have my MBA and I hold a CPA. I've managed departments, budgets, and billions in cash and debt. Don't be fooled by those who say I lack experience as a CEO. Most successful mayors have never been CEOs. None of the 4 mayors I spoke with said that a CEO was important because none of them had such experience. I have the same executive leadership skills that CEOs have, but I also have a strong financial background, professional financial background, that my opponents lack. I also have experience in transitions. I was selected by Quaker Oats to lead the financial spinoff of Fisher-Price. That meant I had to create all new financial infrastructures, and I successfully did this. I've done transitions evaluating finance functions, staffing, structures, controls, technology infrastructure, processes, and policies. And all of this requires no small amount of collaboration and negotiating skills. These are executive functions and why my background more than qualifies me to be your mayor. Now, in 2019, the city voted for a change of government with my full support because we wanted accountability. I have a vision of a very accountable government. Many people I've talked with say they don't get a response from the city when they raise a concern. And that's why on day one, I will reinstate the Community Relations Department. This department acts as a residence guide and liaison to the city's activities and operations. Calls that will have to be answered within 48 hours. That will be a policy of mine. They must call back, and if it takes longer to get the answer, they still have to call back and let them know when to expect the answer. I also have a vision of transparency, and transparency should permeate all of the city's operations, finance, everywhere in the city. For instance, we had a large power outage yesterday that's continuing today. Information from the power company website was out of date and was not reliable. There are elderly people and people with health issues that need power. So I contacted the city and asked them if they would not start by keeping in contact with the power company and then putting it on the website or advising residents what the status was so they would know what to expect, and to provide information on who to contact if help is needed. Racial justice. I have a vision of a city that has racial justice. That will be a lot of work, and it's all in all of our minds because of the Black Lives Matter movement. I pledge to implement the recommendations of our Racial Justice Task Force. That's the force I helped organize and create with Mike Unger and Davita Russell. It's long past time to examine ourselves and to change the way we do business. We must be fair and inclusive with everyone. We say all are welcome. We must prove it. I'll also restructure the housing department because I have a vision of making our housing strong again and getting rid of the bad investor-owned properties. I want to implement the Novak report, including completing the implementation of Citizen Serve and implementing Dynamo Metrics, which is a software to identify housing trends and allows critical analysis. Our housing enforcement needs to change. I'll focus it strategically on the worst investor-owned vacant and foreclosed properties to bring them up to speed. I'll establish a problem properties team so that they can meet every week, law, housing, building, and fire, in order to address things. Conversely, for homeowners, I'll have a more collaborative approach, increasing resources for repair. In fact, I already have scheduled a meeting with court, housing, law, and home repair to discuss a diversion program for homeowners. I love this city, and I'm eager to work and further my work that I began while I was in council. I'd like to extend that work as your mayor. And while my esteemed opponents have some of the same skills I mentioned above, I'm the only candidate that checks all of them.
Thank you, Ms. Hart. And moving on now to Barbara Danforth.
Good evening, and I am Barbara Danforth, and I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters, the Library System, and Future Heights for hosting and facilitating this very important forum this evening. I appreciate living in Cleveland Heights. I love my house and my garden. I enjoy my neighborhood and my neighbors. I wouldn't live anywhere else. And yet I know that Cleveland Heights can be even better. Some of our housing stock is not aging well. Our business districts are struggling to survive or recover from the pandemic. And our citizens deserve to have their calls and questions answered by City Hall. You voted for a strong mayor government, and I can bring the changes that our city needs. But the work of the first term of the new mayor is going to be extremely difficult. The mayor will have to re-engineer the very structure of our government and transition the culture. The mayor will lead a $52 million enterprise that has a staff of 450 and 44,000 customers who are you, the residents. The mayor will have to create a job description and determine the skills needed for the new city administrator position, because right now all we have is a job title. And the mayor will have to ensure that the garbage is picked up and the snow is shoveled and that there is compliance with our city codes while operating within the approved budget. I'm running because I want to answer your call for change. I'm a lawyer, and I hone my problem-solving, negotiating, and communication skills while working as a trial lawyer in private practice and as an assistant attorney general for the state of Iowa. I learned the inner workings of a strong mayor form of government when I served as Cleveland's chief prosecutor in Mayor Michael White's cabinet. I helped families who were struggling and children in crisis when I was a senior legal counsel for the Cuyahoga County Department of Children and Family Services. And I spent 15 years of my career serving as the executive director of the YWCA of Cleveland. And I'd like to tell you about the hardest job that I ever loved. When I was hired, the YWCA had swim and gym facilities, one in East Cleveland. We didn't have any money for the desperately needed renovations, but the board and I decided to make a plan and raise the money and get the renovations done. And so within a year, I raised nearly $500,000 from private donors and from collaborating with community organizations to make that renovation happen. And we completed a beautiful facility that was enjoyed by children in East Cleveland and in Cleveland Heights. Completing that project was really hard work, but the board, the staff, and I worked together and got the job done. When the project was finished, we celebrated by inviting the Cleveland Rockers out to host a basketball clinic with our girls' basketball team. When the clinic was over, the coach came to me and said she really appreciated being out there with our girls, but that they couldn't come back because our gym floor, our wooden gym floor, was in such bad shape that she was afraid that her players would be injured. So I asked her what was she going to do about it, and she looked at me puzzled, and I said, I think you ought to go back to the Rockers and the Cavs organizations and see if they can do something. Sure enough, a week or so later, she called me and said there's new technology around rubberized gym floors, and these floors are made out of recycled tennis shoes. If you collect the tennis shoes, we'll put down the floor. So I asked my staff for their tennis shoes, I asked the board, I asked strangers walking down the street if I could have their tennis shoes. We collected 1,000 tennis shoes and we put a new floor down. And so that's how we got things done. As a board, after the board and staff, we moved to new premises. We opened a child care center. We continued to serve women who were homeless and victims of domestic violence. As executive director, I handled personnel. I prepared the budget and managed it, and together we restructured the organization, transitioned the culture, and built a strong foundation that enabled the YWCA to grow and thrive. I have 10 years of experience in county, city, and state government. I led organizations where the ultimate accountability was mine. And now I'm looking forward to working with you, to bringing my skills and experience so that together we can make Cleveland Heights the very best city that it can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Danforth. For our audience, it is my standard in all forums. It is not my goal to surprise any of the candidates. I like them to answer the questions to the best of their ability. And so it is my pattern to start with the first person and go down the table. Second question, I start with the second person, and so on, so they have some idea of when they will be the first up and when they will be the last up to answer a question. Questions, candidates will have up to 3 minutes to answer a question. If we get into a follow-up situation, that is 1 minute. All right, question number 1, starting with Ms. Hart. Please describe your executive experience, including organization, size of staff, some description of accomplishments or difficulties in a management role. If you have not had executive experience, please describe team building experience, including the size of the team, mission, and accomplishments or problems encountered.
Okay. Well, I've worked over 30 years, in much of it in the Fortune 1000, and I've managed departments of, not large departments, but departments of like 14 to 16 people. I've managed people that are overseas as well, in Asia, in Europe, and in South America. I've had to do budgets for those as well, and I've managed corporate-wide all of the cash and all of the debt across all of the world, including at Goodyear, where I had to do everything worldwide and the compliance on that debt for it to make sure there are no covenant violations or no defaults. I've had to manage teams where we went into Fisher-Price to actually transform it into a company on its own because we were a centralized company and Fisher-Price had no infrastructure. And when I've been in consulting, I've had to go into many corporations and say, okay, they want to know if their structure is right, if their policies are right, and I'll go in and evaluate their whole system, including whether their systems and finance are right, and then I will make recommendations and then implement them for them. I will have to work with their teams and other teams. In Treasury, you have to work with divisions, with subsidiaries, with all kinds of departments, and you have to work with them to get things done. You have to direct them on things like how they're going to use their cash or what they can do for debt, but you also have to collaborate with them on other things. So it's a very important thing that you're working all across the world with all these different teams. And in some ways they report to you because you are dictating to them how they have to operate. In other ways, you're collaborating with them to help them further their goals. So that has been, I've been treasurer, an assistant treasurer, I've been directors, I've gone before boards talking about the finances of the company and where things stand, having to answer their questions, and collaborating with them on how we can make some changes. So I've done all those things within the corporations I've worked for, and that's my executive experience.
Small side note that you are not obligated to fill the entire 3 minutes. I know it's a tendency, it's a human nature, but you don't have to. Ms. Danforth.
Well, certainly early in my career, I worked on teams and I worked in departments. But when I went to work for the city of Cleveland, I started as the chief counsel of the law department, which meant that I was supervising a team of 42 lawyers and a staff of investigators and support staff. The lawyers were managing all the various areas, legal areas of the city, including municipal law, real estate, and all the areas, legal areas that the city was involved in. But then shortly thereafter, I was promoted to the chief prosecutor of the city of Cleveland, and I again supervised a staff of lawyers, a staff of investigators, a staff of mediators, as we process thousands of complaints through our office every year. Then I moved on to the Department of Children and Family Services, and I was a senior legal administrator. Once again, I was managing staff and support staff, but I also stood right next to the director of the department, which is one of the largest departments in Cuyahoga County. And together we worked out the many challenges that that department faced throughout the years. So not only did I directly work with the staff that I was supervising, but really work with the director as we managed that department, the department of the county. At the YWCA, I started as the executive director. My title was changed to CEO, and that was a critically important leadership experience. As I noted, I restructured the organization along with my staff and the board, worked very closely with the board. We didn't agree with each other all the time, but we worked together, found common grounds, and moved the organization forward. I supervised the entire staff. We had as many as 100 staff at that time. We had 5 child care centers and a variety of programs. And then finally, my largest responsibility was I was the CEO of a management company that managed the largest charter school system in the state of Ohio. We served children with learning disabilities on the autism spectrum. We had 1,000 staff, 24 schools, and a budget of $62 million. And I was the CEO, and the buck stopped at my desk. I was ultimately responsible for everything. I was held accountable for everything that went on in that organization. And so that has been the breadth and the scope of my leadership experience.
Thank you very much. Mr. Seren.
Thank you. So my experience professionally has not included, to this point, a title or a position with command and control authority over employees. I have not had a position where the work of accomplishing organizational goals was aided by a threat to fire or discipline any employees. Instead, I've had a great deal of experience inspiring people for whom I have no ability to discipline, to come up with priorities for an organization or for a program, to work together to accomplish those goals, to monitor their performance and help them course correct over the course of a program, and to achieve those organizational goals with a team of people that I've inspired to buy into the goal. I'm a policy advisor for Cuyahoga County Council, and in that role, I don't often get a vote, but I do advise the members of council who do get a vote, and relatively often I stand instead of the council president on boards like the Land Bank Board. Also, as an alternate for our current council members, Sunny Simon and Chantel Brown, on the County Planning Commission. And additionally, as the Secretary-Treasurer for the county's Community Improvement Corporation, where I help to make decisions about underwriting and whether or not to recommend economic development deals to the County Council or the Board of Control for approval. I've also served on the Board of Control for the county, approving deals, approving contracts. Now that work and the programmatic work that I do for the council, implementing programs in collaboration with departments of the county, has been an experience of executive leadership without a title and without the authority to discipline or fire. But I work with directors, and I work with mayors to accomplish the goals of the county council, to accomplish the goals of the county on behalf of the residents of Cuyahoga County. In that role, I work with directors, both of departments and divisions within the county. I help them understand the goals of a program that council has put into place. And I work with those directors, both department and division directors, to achieve those goals and correct them when they have questions or issues with the rules that the council has put in place for a program. Over the last 10 years, there have been multiple programs, process efficiency programs and others, housing programs and economic development programs, where I've played that leadership role, where council has taken charge of a particular program and I've made it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seren. Our next question, starting with Ms. Danforth. What are your priorities in developing a budget for the city?
First priority is going to be around housing. Our housing is one of the most important assets in our city. It is one of the things that attracts people to our city, and yet over the last years, some of our housing stock has not aged well. A year ago, there was a Novak report that was created and sets forth an amazing blueprint for how our housing department can be reorganized. And yet, here we are a year later and virtually no forward progress has been made with that Novak report. And so that would be a first priority, to take that report off the shelf, to look at the 18 recommendations that were made in that report, to prioritize them and to set into motion a series of steps that we can accomplish that report. It requires revamping the technology system, reviewing the staff, reviewing the codes. It requires hiring additional staff. So first and foremost, it really is to take a hard look at our housing department and bring it up to the 21st century as in other similar cities, so that we're no longer doing our inspection reports manually. That only recently changed, but there are still so many things in that department that are done manually. So as it relates to the budget, believing that housing is a priority, a number one priority, we have got to invest and demonstrate in the budget that it is a priority and allocate the needed resources to make sure that that happens. Then there are communities in our city that have not been invested in. I look at the north part of our town has not had the fair amount of investment and certainly needs new and intentional investment. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done along the Noble Road corridor. Another study was done several years ago. And several years later, what we have are some flower pots and some bike lanes. And so that needs, again, intentionality in terms of planning and investment. And then our commercial districts are struggling to survive, some struggling to recover from the pandemic. They deserve the support of the city, because we know that we want to bring people into the city, spend their money. We want to support those business districts. Again, that will be another priority for our budgetary considerations.
Thank you, Ms. Danforth. Mr. Seren.
Thank you. My budgetary priorities are systemic. I think before we start thinking about specific numbers for any specific department or division of the city, we need to take a look at how we budget. And so my first priority will be to work through a system of participatory budgeting to bring the people that we serve into the budgeting decision-making process. Secondly, I think we need to implement a system of budgeting for outcomes. Outcome-based budgeting is a tried and true method for achieving the goals of the organization in the most efficient way possible by, instead of sort of black box budgeting that we do now, where we've got a base budget at the end of a year, we tinker around the edges, and then we put forth a budget that resembles the last year's budget with a little bit of changes made. Instead, we focus on the outcomes that we expect to see, that we hope to see, and we think about the activities that we need to engage in order to experience those outcomes. And then we fund the activities that provide value and bring us closer to the outcomes that we wish to see. That systemic approach will allow us to achieve the goals of the organization in a more holistic, a more complete, and a more efficient way. And when it comes to specific budgetary priorities, I think we all know housing and community development is always going to be a number one priority in a city like ours. I think it's important to note that right now we do not have a housing department. We have a division of building and inspectional services within our Department of Public Safety. I think that we need to create a community development function in the city so that we can build and strengthen our housing markets instead of simply shoring up and inspecting the housing that we already have. Secondly, I think that we need to add capacity in our planning department. Certainly, we need to take a really close and hard look at how we engage in public safety in our city, fund it appropriately, according to the outcomes that we wish to see, not according to a reactionary or an incomplete analysis of how we achieve public safety or how we fund public safety. We need to take a close look at that. And lastly, economic development. A grow your own method of economic development will require that we reorganize how we budget and focus our economic development dollars at small businesses that already exist in our community and potential small business owners that live in our community. And lastly, I'd like to say that every budgetary priority needs to be addressed with equity and sustainability of all forms in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question here specific to the Novak consulting report, which Ms. Danforth spoke to at some length. I don't know if Mr. Seren or Ms. Hart would like to also speak to that, or if Ms. Danforth would like to add anything in light of the question. The question is, have you reviewed the publicly available report of Novak Consulting concerning the city's housing department? What are your views on the consultant's recommendations? What ideas or recommendations do you see as top priorities? Are there recommendations which you do not support? And if so, which ones and why? This will be starting with Mr. Seren.
So I think I can make this brief. I think the Novak consulting report is a nice starting point.
Point of question.
Did you want me to answer the question about budget?
The last question.
This is what I do. I'm very sorry. Yes, please answer the question about budget. I'm very sorry. I got
That's
so
okay.
caught up in.
So I guess let's go back to the T word, taxes. Our budget, we had a tax increase for income tax before, and taxes are at everybody's mind. So it's very important that we do budgeting well, including watching where the dollars are going. Now, I do think we do have to invest as well. So housing is gutted right now and needs to be staffed up. I love the Novak report. I think it was a good report. I think one of the important parts is the strategic enforcement, where we, instead of enforcing just willy-nilly or on a complaint basis, where we focus our efforts on all of the bad investor-owned properties. That's where we should be focusing our efforts: foreclosed properties, vacant properties, investor-owned properties. For individual homeowners, I want to have more of a diversion program for them and being collaborative. So I think putting those things in place and changing the budget to reflect those will help. I also think the police need some help. They don't have all the equipment they need. There hasn't been a replacement program for their cars. We did get some cars this year, but it needs to be a regular thing, like replace X number of cars per year. They got body cams this year, but they don't have dash cams. We need to make sure they're well equipped so that they can do their job. And I'd also like to see some money going toward things like, there's programs like Cure Violence that we need to investigate and see whether we put money there. Or Cahoots, which brings in social workers to help. Those are things I think we need to look at. Housing is the top priority, though, but we do need to look at these other areas and readjust our budget as needed to accommodate that, because we need to move into this century with our way we operate. And I think that requires some changes. It also requires changes in how we report our budgeting. Right now, there's things that are split apart that make it hard to see what the actual cost is. So I think it's very important to restructure that so that we can see the total cost of a department, so that we can better budget for it. All these are part of the vision for making this more transparent and making it a better experience for our residents. I want the residents, when they pay their taxes, I want them to feel they got their money's worth, because that's important. They're paying a lot. They need to get their money's worth.
Thank you very much. All right, the question regarding the Novak report, do you need it to repeat it, or you're fine?
If you'd like to repeat it, I wouldn't mind.
I'd love to. Have you reviewed the publicly available report of Novak Consulting concerning the city's housing department? What are your views on the consultant's recommendations? What ideas or recommendations do you see as top priorities? Are there recommendations you do not support? And if so, which ones and why? Mr. Seren.
Thank you. So yes, I have reviewed the Novak report. I think that it is an appropriate starting point for discussion, but I think that it's a starting point, and we need to go further. I mentioned earlier that we don't have a housing department. We have housing programs within our Division of Building and Inspectional Services. And I think that we've done a bit of a disservice, both to the residents and to the workers in that division, by treating them as though they are a community development department. The missions are different, the approaches are different, the skill sets are different. And at this moment, the city is lacking in a community development function that is robust and creative in the way some of our neighbors have. I think that there are some important recommendations. I think, of course, focused enforcement on investment properties. It's a no-brainer. Providing resources to homeowners instead of simply bringing the hammer down in order to help our homeowners maintain their properties to the standards that we expect. And I think creating a more proactive engagement and communication with our landlords and tenants on these issues is important as well. There are some recommendations in the Novak report, some specific title changes that may or may not be as urgent, but I think they may also be low-hanging fruit that we can simply achieve and move forward. But the most important recommendation is the creation of a comprehensive housing strategy. And moving back to that community development function that we're lacking, we cannot create a comprehensive housing strategy without creating a community development function in the city that would coordinate things like strengthening our housing market. And combine that with our planning function, with our development function, economic development, and working with our business districts to create neighborhood amenities, and also with our inspectional services. Strengthening our housing market requires that inspection and enforcement, but it's only a first step. We need development, true development, in the community and from the city, so that housing strategy can be created with an eye toward building and not just maintaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seren. Ms. Hart.
Yes, I agree that the Novak report is a good report. And I think that the strategic housing plan is where we need to be to strategically enforce and have it a holistic approach and give people who are homeowners more of a break and have resources for them in order to bring them into compliance and not make it a criminal penalty right now. It's all criminal penalty, which I don't think we need to make our residents criminals. Helping them is where we should be. I do think we have to move farther than the implementation of Citizen Serve that has been fully implemented in housing, but not in building and not in the court system. And it needs to be furthered there. And I'd rather spend the money, bring in a consultant, and get it done. Because we're short-staffed now, and it's going to be hard for people to actually do the work of implementation and do their job. So I also think we need to purchase Dynamo Metrics, which is a program that will look at trends, it'll do some research and so forth to try to target, find out where the bad properties are, or do they own like multiple properties? Are these bad investors like multiple offenders or not? Those are important for our enforcement. I do agree that housing should be separate. It should not be part of where it's at. It should have its own spot and be valued just like any other department, because it's really a critical department for the future of the city, because we want to maintain property values. If we do not maintain property values, taxes go up. So we really have to keep that as the priority.
Thank you. Ms. Danforth, will speak further.
I have read and carefully reviewed the Novak report, and I was really impressed with its comprehensiveness and the detail. And I think what we need now is we really need to fully take that report off the shelf and build a plan with timelines that are urgent and go get about the business of implementing that plan. And so there are 18 recommendations, and one of the recommendations is to fully move into a new technology platform, which is Citizen Serve. And then after that, we need to update our housing code. There are some of our housing codes that have not been updated in over 50 years. And so we need to do a careful review of our housing code. And then even before we do that, we have to decide whether we're going to use local codes or a national code model. Both of those have pros and cons, but we need to make a decision about what kind of codes we're going to use. Then we need to update our codes, and we also need to update our enforcement so that we have consistent enforcement of our codes. Once we have the technology updated, we've got our codes updated, then we need to determine the efficiencies and the productivities of our staff, our inspectors, our support staff. And I suspect that once we have recognized and realized ultimate productivity from our technology, we will begin to realign our housing department staffs for their greater efficiency. And one of the interesting recommendations of the Novak report was the creation of a title called Community Liaison. This is a point person that people in the community can talk to when they have questions and concerns about what's going on. But this position can also communicate external to our city, to look at what best practices are elsewhere, to communicate with other cities, with the county, with the state, to see what opportunities are available to us, not the least of which in Washington, D.C., where our Secretary of HUD now is from our community. So we need to have somebody that is a point person for our own residents and a point person that can navigate outside and with other organizations. And as part of all of this housing reconsideration, we need to develop a stronger partnership with Future Heights. They can be partnered with the city so that we can expand our capacity to really move our housing department and all the work that needs to be done in that department forward expeditiously, efficiently, and effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Danforth. Back to Ms. Hart. And city safety. I have 3 questions here, which will kind of morph together of a theme. Does the city have a shortage of police officers, in your opinion? What can the city of Cleveland Heights do about gun violence? And what about the uptick in shootings and break-ins and other criminal activity in and around the Taylor Road to Warrensville Road area? Ms. Hart.
Okay, well, we do have beautiful walkable neighborhoods, but we have had some gun violence. So has South Euclid and a lot of other cities. There is a prevalence of guns, which is unfortunate, and we need to work on the underlying causes of that. Some of that could be poverty as an underlying cause of violence sometimes, you know, because people may not have funds and might need money or whatever. We need to work on programs that address underlying causes. So one of them could be a way to lift people up from poverty, apprenticeship programs. Another thing is there's programs like Cure Violence. They've put this in place in Atlanta and Milwaukee, and they've been able to reduce their gun violence by a lot, like 60% or something like that. And that's, they use people in the community where there is violence, and they find people who are really key to that community and well known, and they work with them on finding the solutions and ways to get people not to commit violence, to not try retaliations if they've had violence committed against them. That's, I think, worth looking into for us, because if it worked in those 2 cities, there's a possibility it could work for us. So I think that's well worth investigating. The program Cahoots is where you have a social worker is dispatched instead of a policeman when there's a crisis, a mental health crisis. And that's far more effective, I think, than sending police out to that. I think we need to find programs like this to prevent violence. We have to find things that will stop violence. So I think programs like these, and like maybe a apprenticeship program to bring people out of poverty and eventually into home ownership in Cleveland Heights, might be ways to start to curb this.
Thank you, Ms. Hart. Ms. Danforth.
As I trust most of us know right now, earlier this week, a 13-year-old boy sitting at a kitchen table lost his life to gun violence. And in our city, that is just not acceptable. So the question is, do we need more police officers? Well, the last time I talked to Chief Mecklenburg, we were down 11 officers. And that, too, is unacceptable. We need to have an adequate police force so that the work that the police need to do gets done. When I was the chief prosecutor for the city of Cleveland, I worked with the police officers, and I know how hard the job is. And you know, the job of being a police officer has gotten even much more difficult in recent years. but they are out there in our streets doing their very best to make our streets as safe as they can be. And for the most part, Cleveland Heights is a safe city. But when you're down 11 officers, that certainly diminishes the ability of the officers to do the best that they can do. And so, yes, I do believe that we need more officers, and we need them to be at their peak, not working double shifts, not being overly tired, but being at their best so that they can give us their best. It is true that we do have root causes, and a proliferation of guns is certainly a root cause. But before we start sending social workers out on calls, even if they are on mental health issues, we need to have collaborations and partnerships so that when police officers go to a particular call on a domestic violence or a mental health case, one, they are well trained into violence reduction, mediation, and perhaps they have someone that goes with them that can advise them on how to manage a situation. But at the end of the day, when you have someone who has become very aggressive and very angry, even if it's a mental health issue, we need our police force to be there to make sure that everyone involved is safe. We have the good fortune of having Metro Hospital right in our midst now that is going to have a 100-bed hospital for mental health and substance abuse patients. We need to be partnering with Metro Health to make sure that we have the best understanding, the best training, the best opportunities to have our police officers be prepared for these kinds of calls. So yes, we do need to work on root causes. We need to collaborate with community nonprofits who do work around family support, but we also need to have our police force being as strong and as prepared as they possibly can be to deal with the emerging issues that are affecting our community, including gun violence.
Thank you. Mr. Seren.
Violence in our community is one of the most important issues that we face. And it's too easy to simply react to horrible tragedies that occur, to horrible acts that people commit, without thinking through how best to address the underlying cause and how best to react without making a situation worse. We know the causes of violence. We know that poverty increases violence. We understand that a cultural reliance on violent dispute resolution is an endemic problem in our society. We need a strong police force that prioritizes investigating and then bringing to justice those people who commit violent acts against their neighbors. We need that function, but that function is a reaction to violent crime. So in addition to that function of investigating violent crimes and making sure that the people who perpetrate those crimes are brought to justice according to our community's values, we also need to step in the middle in a dispute, provide mediation services or violence interruption services. In fact, we've got the leader of an organization who lives right here in Cleveland Heights, who performs exactly that kind of function, violence interruption. Something happens, you know that can spiral out of control. People react and they don't necessarily trust our authorities to help them resolve the disputes. And so they try to resolve it themselves. We can get between the stimulus and the reaction and provide other tools to help them resolve those disputes. In addition, I think that we need to bring back mediation services in our schools and in our city to help neighbors resolve disputes nonviolently. To that end, I have reached out to an organization called Pace e Bene. They have an initiative called Nonviolent Cities. And that initiative creates a structure and a community of cities that are seeking to create a culture of nonviolence, nonviolent dispute resolution. And this would occur in our city staff, on our police force, training this kind of nonviolent way of life in our schools and in our neighborhoods, using our neighborhood groups as intermediaries to work with everybody in our city to learn how to resolve these disputes in a nonviolent way. That is the long-term solution. Since we can't take the guns off of the streets because the state of Ohio does not allow us to, we need to take the motivation out of the hands of the people holding those guns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seren. Question about taxes. Lower middle income residents are finding it harder to afford to live here because of the high tax rates. The city seems willing to give tax abatements to businesses and people buying new luxury apartments, but what is going to be done to help those struggling to pay high taxes? Starting with Ms. Danforth.
Well, one example of what we are doing is certainly the infill housing project that is going to hopefully be initiated soon in the Caledonia area, where the each house homeowner will be given a 15-year 100% tax abatement. And that will enable new and young homeowners to be able to afford those homes. And so that will be helpful to those who otherwise might not be able to live in the city of Cleveland Heights. Although I must admit I have some challenges with the residential abatements. My concern is that when the abatements expire, can the homeowners continue to afford their homes? So if you start out with we'll say a mortgage of $850, a family can afford that. But at the end of that 15-year period, once taxes get added in, that monthly price tag almost doubles. So in my estimation, as it relates to the tax abatements on residences, I would envision a graduated tax abatement. Year one, they start with 96% abatement. Year two, it goes down to 88% and continues to go down every year, so that at year 15, they're at a zero, each year making the appropriate adjustments to their budget, so that on year 15, they have adjusted the budget, they are ready to take their mortgage and their taxes, and they can afford it. So I would advocate on behalf of graduated tax abatement system. But as it relates to commercial development, we certainly know that we have to be competitive. And cities all around us are looking to do development as we are. And so we do have to provide tax incentives for developers who want to do business in our community. However, I think we have an obligation to negotiate those incentives really tough to make sure that we're getting the best deal that we can possibly get. And even though we abate the property taxes, when we have residential multi-unit development happening, we certainly have the benefit of income tax, and that certainly will increase the tax revenue that comes into our city. But those tax incentives are important if we are to be competitive.
Thank you. Mr. Seren.
So our property taxes are part of a larger problem in the state of Ohio, where our state legislature has not seen fit to create a system that comports with our Ohio Constitution. I think that there is room for the city, and we've made some progress on this, providing residential tax abatement that is a tiered approach. In places of the city where home values are lower or incomes are lower, there is a larger tax abatement for improvements to a home for people that need it more in neighborhoods that need it more. I think there are circumstances in which commercial tax abatement or tax increment financing is an important piece of a capital stack for development. But I think part of the reason that this tax burden has become unsustainable is the fact that the city is not proactive in helping people through connection with job retraining, connection with job placement services. Traditionally, municipalities, especially suburban municipalities, don't get involved in connecting their residents to the services that are already on offer in Cuyahoga County. And I think being more proactive and helping people in our community find more and better when it comes to employment and wages, the more we'll find this particular tax burden that we face is a bit more easily handled. So I think that's a step in the long term. Our property taxes are one issue. Our income taxes are another. And I think it's important that we understand the difference between those two and what control we have over one versus the other. Our income tax is generally not what people are concerned about when they complain about taxation in this city. It's a property tax that goes to fund our schools and our libraries and to some small degree, the city. It's by lobbying our state and finding ways to partner with our school district to increase efficiencies that we can reduce the amount of money that we're expending and take it from that side so that we can reduce the amount of money that we have to supply in order to create a system of public education that is worthy of our students. I'm not one to lower taxes on an ideological basis. I think that it's important that we fund robust city services, and we also have to be cognizant and aware of the difficulty that it creates for our residents and provide services and connection to services when we can't fund them ourselves. So thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Hart?
Well, I do think our CRA program is a good program, and we have currently, as of this week, 373 vacant lots in the city. That's a lot. Then we have vacant houses too, but we have 373 vacant lots. And we're just doing a portion of them right now that we're going to be doing in infill housing. But still, that's good. It helps up the tax base, which also lowers the tax rates. And Kahlil's right. Property taxes, primarily the schools, our budget is about 10% of it comes from the property tax. So we don't have a lot of impact. So the best impact we can have is making sure that we have a constitutional funding method for our schools, which will then result in lower property taxes. It's good that at least we got it to where the vouchers are funded from the state. That helps us. That helps us. And we have to work closely with the school. We're tied to the school like this. Their fate determines our fate a lot as a city. So, and our fate determines theirs. So we have to work together to make sure they're successful and that the tax rates don't overburden the public. I do think that workforce development is an important point. We have 20% poverty rate in our city. That is more than the state. That's more than the other cities around us. Why not lift them up? You know, if we lift people up, then we will have more people in homes, more people contributing to the tax burden, so that there will be less for everyone. It'll divide differently. So I think these are all important. I also think some regionalization is important, but that will affect income tax more than it will affect property tax. So I think those are all good things to think about. We do have to watch the taxes here, but we have to help the schools if we want to actually have an impact.
Thank you, Ms. Hart. Final question before we do closing statements. And due to timing constraints, I know we started late, so I'm going to run longer, but if you could limit your answer to 2 minutes on these. It's a minor question. What do you consider to be the most pressing issue facing our city, and how do you plan to address it? Starting with Mr. Seren.
All right. I think generally the answers will usually range from housing and making sure our housing stock is well maintained, or economic development and making sure that we can diversify our tax base to take some of the contribution and draw that from commercial instead of residential residents of our community. But I think that it goes a little bit beyond that to a foundational problem with our city, and that is the capacity of the city government to achieve its organizational goals. We are well below capacity both in staffing and in processes to achieve the things that we want to achieve and then go further and build a community that we want to see. So we will have to take a look at our staffing capacity and do some aggressive recruitment and professional development. We will also have to take an aggressive look at how we do the business of the city in order to increase our efficiency, remove waste, increase reliability, and bring our government into the 21st century. There are technological advances that we are missing out on by simply not proactively engaging. We are also missing out on improving our processes in collaboration with the employees who do the work. Any process improvement program involves input from the people doing the work. And as mayor, I will make sure that their input into our processes and the outcomes that our residents expect to see are involved in our determination of how we do the work we do. Building that capacity will help us in housing, economic development, public safety, planning, you name it. So that's the underlying problem of the city, is capacity building and achieving the goals of the organization.
Thank you. Ms. Hart?
All of our staff is understaffed. Our police are understaffed, housing is understaffed, building isn't even staffed. It's outsourced because we don't have staff. Everything is understaffed. And some of that has to do with perhaps the, in some cases, the condition of work for the police. If you don't have the tools you need, why should you stay there? You could go someplace else. It might have to do on some of the departments as well with pay. Our pay may be too low. Housing, I want someone to come and stay. And perhaps some programs maybe to help people, to incent people to stay or to live here even. That would be good, incent them to live in our city. I think the most important part is, out of all these, it's bad that all of them are understaffed, but housing is critical because it means that our housing stock declines, which is negative to all of the city. So I really think we have to staff that up. We have to implement the Novak plan. We have to get them top-notch and running well. We have to have the programs in place. Other departments likewise have to. I think we could also regionalize. For instance, building department is state code. So why do we all have to have separate building departments? Why don't we get a group of us together and say, why don't we have one building department that services a number of us cities? Because it is the same building code. That's not housing, but building code. There are other ways. There are cities that may have old garbage trucks and maybe adjacent to us, may need some garbage trucks, but we could instead offer to do their garbage and they could pay us instead. That would lower costs for both of us. So I think there are ways that we can find to help to reduce some of those costs, then they can be reallocated elsewhere as well.
Thank you, Ms. Hart. And Ms. Dan?
There are a multitude of issues critically facing our city right now. But one of the many things that I'm impressed with about Cleveland Heights are the residents. There is passion, there is expertise, there is a willingness to roll up their sleeves and help Cleveland Heights be the best that it could be, and yet we often make it difficult for residents to become engaged. That was my experience. And so I think one of the ways that we begin to solve the multitude of issues that we have is bringing together people, making it easy for them to access, encouraging them to be part of the solutions. We live side by side. We need to learn now to work hand in hand so that we can move our city forward. And by bringing together the expertise and the passion and the interest of our residents, we can formulate task force and commissions to expand the capacity of our staff. Yes, we are understaffed, but we will always have a finite budget, and that will have limitations. So how do we take what we have and expand it? We can do it with the interest of our residents. We have got to make that an easy access. We've got to encourage people. We've got to show our residents how they can make a difference in how our city moves forward. So that's what I see as a solution to many of the issues, because people have expertise in environment, in housing, in development. We need to bring them to the table, and together we need to make decisions so that we can move our city forward.
Thank you, Ms. Danforth. We turn now to our closing statements. Each candidate will have 5 minutes for their closing statement. And going in reverse order from where we started, we start with Barbara Danforth.
Well, once again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. And I'd like to thank Melody and Kahlil for participating tonight. This is an exciting time, perhaps the most important election that we've ever had in the city of Cleveland Heights. We have one chance to do this transition right. And how we do this transition is going to impact every one of us, not just for years, but for decades to come. Executive experience does matter. Holding the title of executive director, holding the title of CEO does matter, because it means that in this role, I have held ultimate accountability for what goes on. I got blamed for what people didn't like. My staff was rewarded for things that did go right. But I was held accountable because the buck stopped with me. And so, council members must know details of city issues and city policies. The mayor, however, not only has to know the issues, the mayor has to know how to run a business enterprise. Those are two very different skill sets. So what is my vision for Cleveland Heights? Well, I envision a city where the residents have easy access and are encouraged to participate in moving our city forward. I envision a city where we have plans to reduce our carbon footprint and sustainability is embedded into the very fabric of our city. I envision a city where we have innovative plans for home ownership and we return vacant properties back to the market for sale. Our business districts will be growing and thriving. There will be cranes in the air with projects that we're going to be proud of. We will enthusiastically support our public schools, and we will be bursting with pride over our arts and culture community. But to realize this vision, we have a lot of work to do. And a vision without a plan is just a dream. So we need to make a plan. We need to create some goals. We need to set a timeline, and we need to move forward with urgency. So I'm looking forward to working with you and bringing my experience in leading organizations and my knowledge of city issues so that together we all can make Cleveland Heights the very best city that it can be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Danforth. Melody Joy Hart.
We've all said a lot here today, and I want you to remember what we each said. Once one of us is in office, you should hold us to what we said today. What I said in my opening statement has not changed by anything anyone else has said today. I still check all the boxes: community engagement, strong financial experience, CPA, executive experience, knowledge of city government. And being a CEO is not the only people who have where the buck stops. In finance, the buck stops at the treasurer. So CEO experience is a red herring in essence. No mayor I spoke with said that the experience was prerequisite. In fact, East Providence mayor was a police captain and former legislator. Mayor of Maple Heights was part of the bank staff and high up, but not a CEO. Mayor Brennan was an attorney. So there are many mayors who are not CEOs. And I think that the skill sets are inherent in other people besides CEOs. The issues I focused on were also discussed by my esteemed opponents. The issue of responsiveness is important to us all. And that is part of my vision, because I want us to be at the top of responsiveness of all the cities. I want our housing department to be the gold standard of housing. I want safe streets. I want the police to have what they need. And I think police reform, in a sense, is important. Not that I feel that our police have done anything that has been untoward. It's not like we're looking at Minneapolis or any place like that. You know, they're pretty good. And I think they're well trained. But reform in terms of having programs to help that are not police oriented, but help for crisis intervention, for mediation, those types of things are important for police as well. The EPA lawsuit over our sewer system is just beginning to result in costs to the city and the residents. It certainly is on my mind, and it may be one of the biggest issues the city has faced in its history. For education, unconstitutional funding of the system has been an issue, and it's on all of our minds because we want our taxes to be not escalating. Community service is on all of our minds, and all of these are on your minds as well. But which one of us has actually done something about these issues? I started a program of accountability for the city staff based on complaints made at public comment and council meetings. I'll continue that. For housing enforcement, I worked to pass and amend the foreclosure bond. I walked the streets to find which investor-owned houses the city should be aware of. I amended the out-of-county owner and vacant property registration to include a civil remedy, appointed sale, fines, and amended bond. For police reform, I've supported policy changes, attended Councilwoman Russell's forum regarding that, talked with Safer Heights, and formed the Racial Justice Task Force with Unger and with Davida Russell. The Racial Justice Task Force will take a deep dive into police practices and try to remedy it. They'll also look at housing, economic opportunities, education, and health practices which lead to disparate treatment. On education, I took action with hundreds of other people and wrote to get the state of Ohio to take responsibility for paying for the vouchers directly so our property taxes would not be impacted. Happily, this advocacy worked. The vouchers are still available to our district children and will be funded, though, 100% by the state of Ohio and not by our property taxes. For economic development, I've amended the last two agreements to include Cleveland Heights values, such as prevailing wage, local hiring, non-discrimination, and sustainability. We need to know what you want in development before we put out a request for proposal. And then we need to find developers who will do the development we want and need. Make no mistake, we need economic development. We've been losing population for 70 years. With fewer and fewer people, there are fewer and fewer us, so tax rates and taxation have to increase. Lastly, the sewer system, we have to repair it, and we are under a court mandate, so there's no wiggle room. As a person who believes in sustainability, I don't mind because we have to repair it. We need a finance person to lead that process and set a course for success. I believe we can do that. And if we all work together, we can try to get the federal government to fund some of it, perhaps. We need to move forward together and make this city what it should be, a more advanced, progressive city that takes into account all of our values: sustainability, housing, having people be able to succeed. All these things have to be in our new city. I hope I'll have your vote on September 14th.
Thank you, Ms. Hart. Kahlil Seren.
Thank you. So I've often said that if you want a window into what any candidate will do as mayor for Cleveland Heights, take a look at what we've done for Cleveland Heights. Over the last 6 years, I've worked hard to push my colleagues in the administration to think about service in a new way, to engage with residents proactively, and to begin the conversation in an open way instead of behind closed doors. There are often situations where we could avoid trouble downstream by simply involving residents in the conversation at the beginning. That kind of systemic change is the kind of change that you'll see in a Seren administration in Cleveland Heights. Constant communication with residents about issues, about how we want to see a parcel developed, about what we need in a community to produce the kind of demand for housing, what kinds of amenities we need in our business districts, park space. These are the issues that matter to the people in our city, and these are the issues that I'll attack proactively. It's also what I've done over the course of my time on City Council, whether it's eliminating secret meetings of the council so that people can be involved in the discussion, or simple things like deciding to hold committee meetings as a committee chair and to demand that those committee meetings be held in council chambers and on camera so that the people can see what we're talking about and understand why we're making the decisions we're making. I've been a proactive legislator because I know that change requires action. And through that action, created a foreclosure bond. I've forced landlords to pay their property taxes if they're going to rent in our community. Irresponsible landlords hurt us all, other landlords, tenants, and the city at large. The kind of work that I want to do as mayor will be bold. We'll create stretch goals that we'll need to work hard to achieve, but I'll roll my sleeves up and work with our staff and provide them the tools to achieve those goals. I think it's important for you to understand the records of each of the candidates before you. Don't just look at the titles we've held. Look at what we've done with those titles. Look at the improvements that we've made in our communities. 10 years professionally working for the county, I've helped to remove blight from our neighborhoods, unsafe structures that were used in unsafe ways. And I've also created programs to assist in the rebuilding of our communities. That work will continue with me as mayor in Cleveland Heights. I hope for your support. Learn more about me at serenformayor.com. Reach out and ask me if you have any questions. I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you to the League of Women Voters and the library for hosting.
Thank you, Mr. Seren, and thanks to all three of you for coming and for being so dedicated to the role. This concludes our candidate forum for the mayor of Cleveland Heights. May I give my most sincere apologies to all of the people who sent in such good questions that there simply was not time for. It was very hard to choose as I watched the time tick down. I would like to thank all of our volunteers who made this evening possible, and to thank all of you for watching and paying attention. Most importantly, don't forget to get your copy of the Voter's Guide, which you will find inside the Heights Observer or online at futureheights.org. The primary election is September 11th. Voting, I believe, begins...
September 14th.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't know where I got 11th from, probably last year. September 14th, and early voting starts next Tuesday, I believe.
August 17th.
Thank you. She is on top. The main election then is November 2nd. Early voting will start 1 month before. If you are not yet registered, you can register to vote for the main election. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.